Thank you, Laura. Good morning. And Lauren, you just kind of upped the game on the workshop here. I don't, do we need to give away 500? Anyway, I want to give a little bit of background on us and how we actually got here. So we really believe in working in the system and working on the system. So DuPuis had started, I'm going to age myself, 35 years ago. And John has actually been with me for 30 of those years. And we're still very good friends. We still like each other. And we continue to work with a lot of multinationals, a lot in the big food industry, alcohol industry. And in doing so, I mean, I can give you a little bit of a background. When my daughter was 8 years old, we were working on a lot of the sugary, Captain Crunch and Pop-Tarts and fruit roll-ups. And my wife would not let my daughter eat those things. And so my daughter comes to me and says, Daddy, why won't you let me eat those foods that you work on? And that really struck me because we're running off to Whole Foods and eating all organic. And so it's like, I think I need to really take a really hard look at things. And so we really started transforming the company. Yes, we still work with a lot of those big, large companies, but we're actually influencing them by working in the system and going internally with them. And then working on the system, we actually separated the company and started DuPuis D3. And so it's located, DuPuis is located in Chicago, and D3 is located in Ventura, California. And we're working with companies that really want to change the system, that are doing positive impact. And so, for instance, we work with Patagonia. It's convenient because they're right there in Ventura. So really that got us involved with, and that's what led us to even working with Keeping Forests. And that's actually where I got to know Roger. Roger and hired us when he's working with the Audubon Society. So then I'm going to let Roger give a little bit of intro on himself.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here. And boy, look, I want to start too with John. I mean, we're talking about branding. Look at him. I mean, is he branded or what? So I don't know, maybe to top the money being given away, we're all going to change later, and we'll all be in Keeping Forest brand, maybe. I'm delighted to be here. A couple of things just to establish my forestry bona fides and also my southern bona fides. From a forestry standpoint, my most recent engagement was with the LAD Foundation Pioneer Forest. Has anybody heard of that in Missouri? Yeah, the largest private landowner in Missouri by far, 150,000 acres, combination sustainable forestry, white oak, right? Sustainable forestry efforts and conservation efforts on a very large scale across 6 counties in Missouri. While I was there, we SFI certified, and that's going to play into the examples we bring here earlier. As mentioned, I was state director of the Nature Conservancy a long time ago. I worked with a certain gentleman you might have heard of, Randy Moore, when he was Mark Twain Forest Supervisor. We did a forestry project there. I just really cherish those 3 years Randy and I worked on things before he became an eminence, right? Just to finish, and you'll see some of this, I was a senior executive at the National Audubon Society, have done a lot of contract work at the intersection of markets and conservation and agriculture, so delighted to be doing that with forestry here. And, it's the Southern Ozarks, right? I was born in this. Can I be an adopted Southerner here today? I mean, you got 13 Oh, no, what? No. Okay. Well, I like to think, right? So delighted to be here and look forward to really trying to make the examples that I'll bring forward very tangible and actionable.
So I'm going to start at the beginning just to really get grounded on branding. And so really, every day we're seeing thousands and thousands of brands. And when we look at these brands, many of these will instantaneously come to mind a product or a service. I mean, IKEA, oh my gosh, okay, I'm going to be building that furniture. Nestle, what's so interesting, we've worked with Nestle for over 20 years. They keep trying to change the perception that they're not chocolate, but probably most of you immediately thought chocolate. But they're the largest food company in the world. And actually they sold off a majority of their chocolate. But that tells you how perception, once a perception's set, it's very, very hard to change. But in each one of these, each one of us have an emotional and a functional feeling about a typical a company or a brand. And it takes a tremendous amount of money to actually build those in the minds of the consumer. And so a brand becomes a collection of stories, visions, and associations made up of reputation, experience, long-lasting relationships, and a symbolic value. So when you see that symbol, all those stories and emotions immediately come to you. But what's really difficult is that we're seeing over 5,000 brands per day. So even a brand loyalist, I mean, in this this cartoon, it's like there's so many other things that are in our minds that it's so hard to be able to get in there and say, okay, my brand is going to stick and it's meaningful. And that's what we're going to talk today a little bit about, is how you can actually make that happen. And this is why it takes so much money to be able to get a product brand in a consumer's mind, and it's got to be relevant and it's got to mean something. So, and most people worldwide would not care if more than 73% of brands just disappeared tomorrow. So that says, okay, what is it that makes it stick? And so when we look at this chart here, commodities, I mean, commodities, there's no difference except for price. So a lot of, if you're a commodity brand, it's really just going pricing down to the bottom. Then you go over to brand names. And it's, well known but similar. And we probably, a majority of us probably flew here. And this is where I just kind of look at it as those are airplanes with names on them. Yes, they're brands, but when you look at it, what differentiates American from United to Delta? Not much. You're just looking at a lot of times price, or oh boy, I've got to get my miles so I can get a free flight. And so, you could almost say that Southwest tried to push a little bit out and have distinction, which goes to the next one, which is creating a distinction, creating a difference, creating a meaningful difference. And that's where, Southwest was trying to do that. And when you think about those other three, I mean, I flew United, which I typically fly American. It was pretty much the same thing. Then you get to genuine brands. And that is when a genuine brand would be like an airline that all of a sudden it's like, I'm going to pick that one over everybody else, irregardless. Almost, I'd even pay a little bit more. And so that means it's so unique and so differentiating and so meaningful to you that you would want to say, I will pick that no matter what. And that becomes a brand loyalty. So when you look at brands, there has to be a strong meaning. And when you look at when we talk about meaning, it's sort of like a meaning change. You look at Uber. Uber, like with taxis, before Uber, it was just saying, I'm going to take a taxi. And you'd hail a taxi. Uber changed that meaning by the taxi is coming to you. And it was using that technology, so it came to you. So that's a meaning change. Tesla was changing that whole meaning of transportation. It was technology on wheels. Then you go to a promise. What is the promise of a brand? And, you could say like Starbucks, it's like, okay, I'm going to get that same really good cup of coffee no matter where I go across the country. It's that promise. And then there's the purpose. What is your purpose and your values? All this signals relevance and differentiation. And that distinctiveness and relevance of a brand starts with a unique business strategy. And that's what we're really in our workshop is going to be dealing with business strategies. What are some unique ways we can look at this? And so what business strategy can transform a market for Southern Forest products? And so, as we look at all the different brands that are supporting keeping forests, how do we make ourselves really unique and distinguished? And so, going to this chart and the examples that we're going to be sharing with you today, I want to start with going off to the one side. You have producers, farmers, ranchers, and landowners. And through all of our experience, we've found that obviously they're looking to optimize their natural resources. They're, in many cases, are trying to do regenerative. And what we find is that in the middle here is really the broker brands. Those broker brands are verifications, assurances, they're certifications, they're creating credibility, they could be co-ops, they could be networks, and they're providing opportunity for businesses, people, and the planet. So from there, these broker brands are helping influence the big brands, that will monetize a finished good. And we'll give examples of this, because consumer and manufacturing brands, they have the pulse of the consumer. They have the money to be able to get it out there. So, but they also need these brands in the middle. And those are usually, like what we'll show you, Audubon in that situation, wildlife friendly. Others have actually been, finding these opportunities and bringing them to the consumer brand and saying, hey, can you launch this? And that seems to be the one system that has actually worked very well. So I'm going to talk about it.
All right. Yeah, I have 4 different examples here, and they align with what we're going to talk about in the workshop. I do want to say, you already see certification up here. We're not recommending anything in that regard or verified outcomes. What we're trying to do is to give tangible, convene, innovate, scale models that have worked and tried to solve 2 issues, which is what I think this group is attempting to do, right, or wants to do in that regard with this strategy. So, National Audubon Society, on contract, I actually started with 2 other gentlemen, now one at a major foundation and one with the Missouri Department of Conservation, this certification program in my basement. And it did eventually scale. I gotta tell you, and just it takes a lot of effort to do this, a lot of time and staff capacity over time. But we eventually, as you'll see, did reach significant scale. So there's a really uncanny connection here with this group. What were we trying to solve at Audubon? We were trying to solve that 85% of grassland birds and grasslands are on private land. Okay, very similar to what we've heard here, right? 86%. I relentlessly said 85% when we were framing this out as the problem. And so what the solution became was to identify that problem, frame that problem, and go into the marketplace utilizing Audubon's brand. Okay, so that brand was pretty well known, and we tested the extent to which that brand. And what do you think the brand aligned with? When people think of Audubon, what do they think about? Birds, right? They don't think about beef or bison. They don't think about grass-fed beef or bison, so we had to work through that and what we're actually certifying as a mark. So we developed the science of what's good for grassland birds. We identified the regions of the country that we knew that we wanted to work in so that we could attack, just like you need to here, that 85% of private landowners that were that harbored grassland birds. So after, wait for it, after a decade utilizing Audubon staff capacity, I got to say also when we framed this challenge out, might be instructive here, right? We got a lot of philanthropic engagement up front with this strategy because we were bold about it. Margaret A. Cargill Foundation, no relation to the company, Bobolink Foundation, big foundation in Missouri, really Missouri Department of Conservation. We framed this out and we got a lot of resources because people saw it as innovative in grass-fed beef, by the way. The science showed us that grass-fed beef was the niche and market that we would work in. So now the map on the left, it is across 3.5 million acres as of 2022, and 140 ranches. And interestingly, you mentioned IKEA. They visited Missouri last week because they're going to have all meatballs they sell in IKEA stores Audubon certified. So there's a couple of things before I move on here. One is a lot of small companies combine locality and Audubon, right? The bigger companies are telling a broader, more sweeping story, and as we'll end with, this did scale to some really big enterprises. So what's instructive here for keeping forest? Hopefully evident by some of the things I just said. It's interesting to me when I looked at, we identified the cluster of those ranches are not coincidental where they're at. We did a design of where we wanted to recruit ranchers for ecosystem value in birds, and it might be something this group might want to look at from forest diminishment and develop criteria of where you want to do your pilot projects. Here's another example that is very similar to Audubon, but has a different structure that hopefully might be instructive here. And that is more of a co-op structure and a verified outcome scheme. So the Savory Institute, Alan Savory, is big in grazing, South African, not nearly as strong a basic brand as Audubon as a broker brand, as Stephen was saying. But they developed a method by which they have these co-op hubs. You assemble these co-ops, you give basic land services to those co-ops learn from each other, and then marketplace opportunity is generated through the Savory staff. Now here again, to get to this level of 5 million acres, 80 brands, verified products, this is a pretty significant staff with a lot of philanthropy and business investment in this. But that was quite a successful enterprise along this broker brand notion too. Another potential model here is that logo is regenerative organic. Regenerative organic was an attempt by a lot of different very values-oriented companies to go up above organic certification, using organic certification as a baseline and hitting the topmost values around animal welfare, around soil health, around fair labor practices, and finding niche markets across, and you see the supply chain here, across the entire supply chain. This is like gold, platinum standard, finding significant niche markets. I'm not saying this is what you would do at all, but here, if you'd use it analogously, it would be like you would start with SFI as a base standard and then have a set of verified outcomes above that to try to generate that market opportunity. So finally, the last here is a little different model. Most everybody in here, I'm sure, is aware of the success of the Land Trust Alliance and bringing people together to learn, advocate, connect, and have a membership structure that helps with supporting them. Here is potential opportunity, if you want to do a different kind of model, is to do a Land Trust Alliance model in which you just get really good at working with those private land organizations that are throughout the South, right? And learn from them, understand what they want, and provide those services. And probably my guess would be better access and understanding of markets at a high level there. Somebody I saw on the list, I put this National Alliance of Forest Landowners. Somebody's here. Hello. So, I put this in here just like Yeah, tell us what you think, right? It's the spirit of feedback here. We don't have any proposed solutions here, but there's a national organization. Obviously, I haven't worked with your organization before, but you tell us, right, whether there's keeping forests could add value in the South in that regard. So just trying to get those models out so the branded guy here can bring it home in the workshop. All right, Stephen, I think that's what I've got here.
Okay, I want to kind of show you how, when I showed that earlier chart, how this actually has worked. And Patagonia being a consumer brand, they also developed Patagonia Provisions, which is a division of Patagonia, which is focused on food. And so the founder of Patagonia, Von Chenard, had realized that our food system is contributing to climate change in a huge way, but it can also be the solution to climate change. And so it made a commitment to really looking at regenerative agriculture and rebuilding our soil. I mean, we're losing our soil at a rapid rate. And so really, when they set that up, then it's like, well, how did they start developing the products? Well, when they did this, they became known for going after regenerative agriculture. And then the Land Institute said, hey, we've got something we need your help with. And so the Land Institute had developed Kernza. And so Kernza is a deep-rooted grain that's a perennial. So you're not having to till it every single year. And you can even see the root system goes down like 6 feet. And so, and what did we do for the very first product? With Kernza, we made a beer. So it was a long-rooted ale. Now, since then, we've made pasta, we've made other things, but it just shows you that the Land Institute came to them. When they came to Patagonia, Patagonia then invested in building a milling facility and so forth, because anytime we're bringing a product to market, there's a lot of money that has to be put into it to make the product, to scale the product. And so this is where we go to those consumer product companies that can actually bring it to market for us. So, but the Land Institute had the idea, had the concept, had the idea to get it to market. But now let me show you what happened afterwards, because even Patagonia couldn't bring it to full scale. And so when we talked to them, we said, you guys are the tip of the spear. You're bringing to market ideas for the bigger companies to take them and really scale, that are even bigger than Patagonia. So really what happened here is that from the success of Patagonia and the Land Institute and showing how Kernza could actually be a viable crop, that got General Mills involved in it. And now General Mills is supporting the Land Institute, and now they're doing thousands and thousands of acres. They're growing Kernza. They're going to be making cereal and other things out of it. But this is showing how everybody along the line is helping contribute to getting to a scaled situation where it can actually have an environmental impact. And that's the same thing with Audubon. It was the Panoramic Organic, and then Purdue ended up getting involved in it. So, I think we have to realize that we are where we are and how we can create influence to actually create change. So, these are all different models that we shared today. And so in our workshop, we're going to go through and do a lot of what ifs and take other models and these models and really listen to you guys on what, which Lauren, I love that comment about listening, because really going full circle, a brand is not what you say it is, it's what your customer says it is. And so, so we look forward to seeing some of you in our workshop. Any questions?